top 40 running backs going into the fantasy football season. This is the first of many ranking videos, and we're excited to bring you the running back edition. So talk it up. Keep in mind, this list is very fluid, okay?
Yes.
A lot of things could be changing as we get closer and closer to the season. And Zach, take us through your running backs.
Yeah, I mean, the first tier, I don't think we need to spend too much on. This is Christian McCaffrey. It's his tier alone. Every year people find a way not to make Christian McCaffrey the RB1. And almost every year it's the wrong decision, right? So I'm just going to make him the RB1. All of these rankings, by the way, are not just like my opinion. I didn't like mindlessly just put them together on a piece of paper. This is all through a projection machine where I am literally handing out every piece of this offense to different players. Christian McCaffrey was one of the most dominant players in the NFL last year from a usage perspective. I don't see a reason for them not to continue to use him in that light. I think he gets over 55% of the team's rushing attempts. I think he sees a healthy target share around 15 to 17%. He's going to be up there in the 85 target kind of range for this team. He was one of the main reasons that they got to the Super Bowl, and I don't see a reason, just because he's older, I don't see a reason to not make him the RB1 at this point.
Yeah, completely agree. 24.5 fantasy points per game. That was more than every single wide receiver in fantasy last year. Keep that in mind. Yeah. Which is crazy.
It's ridiculous what he was able to accomplish.
No question.
Do you have him on his own as well? You agree?
Yeah, I have him on his own, no question. I think there could be an argument to where these guys could be projected. There could be a new RB1 this year, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're always going to be taking Christian McCaffrey unless you have a really strong conviction on probably some of the following players we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, well, in the next tier, Zach, I labeled it RB1 Battle because I think these running backs in this tier have a real shot at battling Christian McCaffrey to claim that RB1 spot in fantasy. Yep. Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Saquon Barkley. As he goes over to the Philadelphia Eagles, I think he's set for a massive year behind that offensive line. As far as Bijan goes, is there anyone in this industry or anyone who plays fantasy football, rather, who would disagree with the following statement? Arthur Smith in the Falcons did not use Bijan properly in year one. Would anyone disagree with that?
No.
Like, let's stop playing around and giving Tyler Algier a huge amount of carries. Funnily enough, just before we started recording this video, Badaki, a report came out where Bijan said that the Falcons intend to use him the way that the Niners use Christian McCaffrey. And I kind of agree. I see a similar usage. I mean, I gave Christian McCaffrey about 56% of his team's rushing attempts. Deebo Samuel plays a big part there in taking some of that.
Sure.
Bijan Robinson, I gave 58% of the team's rushing attempts. I think he's going to have a little spike up, as you don't need to, have a doctorate's degree to decide to give him the ball. I think he also is going to see over 15% of the targets over there in Atlanta. I think he gets somewhere around 85 to 90 targets in his second season. He's going to be a monster. We saw the talent. We saw how good he was in the passing game. We saw how explosive he was in the open field. Now he gets an offense, by the way, that is competent. An offense that has an actual quarterback who can lead them down the field, more scoring opportunities. I think he's going to be a monster. As far as Breece Hall goes, I don't think he's going to have the same impact in the air, not because he's less talented, but because if we truly project this offense and project it with Aaron Rodgers playing the entire season, then there's not a reason to dump down the ball to Breece Hall 11 times per game, right? You want your offense well-balanced. He's going to have more scoring opportunities in the red zone.
Exactly.
But he's probably not going to get 10 targets per game because Zach Wilson or Jets backup quarterback is dumping the ball off to him. He's going to be more efficient. He might not have as many targets, but he's still going to score a ton of fantasy points. Jahmyr Gibbs is set for another huge season. Had a great rookie year and slowly was worked into that rotation more and more and more as the season started last year. David Montgomery, I think, still has the edge in total rushing share, if you will. But I do think that it's going to be a clear 50-50 split. But the advantage for Gibbs is how involved he's going to be in the air.
Exactly.
I mean, last year already as a rookie, he had 14% of the target share. I mean, there's some rookie wide receivers who didn't even get 14% of their team's target share. I wouldn't be surprised if that bumps up all the way to, 15, 16, 17%. They're talking about using him in the slot. That's ridiculous. Every year, there's a report coming out. We're going to use this guy in the slot. We're going to use Deuce Vaughn in the slot as well. It's just, they're probably not going to do it, but if they do, great. And then Saquon Barkley, who I think is going to be less involved in the air than we're typically used to seeing in his career. But I think rushing behind that offensive line, he is going to dominate. I think he's going to put up over, 1,300 rushing yards, like that kind of season. If DeAndre Swift can average 4.5 yards per carry behind that offensive line, what could a healthy Saquon Barkley do, right? So I'm excited about all these names. I could see a scenario where any one of these guys is a RB1 this year in fantasy football, and I want these dudes on my team drastically in every draft.
Yeah, and if you're at the late end of your draft or second half of the draft, I would say maybe the 107 onwards. I think this could be a soft spot. Obviously, we did our first mock draft of the season. That could be, once again, very fluid. Some of these guys can get higher and higher, like those reports that we've seen come out for Bijan Robinson be utilized as Christian McCaffrey going into this year. But all of these guys, I would completely agree, are first-round picks in your rookie draft, or maybe just outside. Maybe I think Saquon can fall into the early second of that turn. But all these guys...
in your fantasy drafts, right?
Yeah,
in rookie drafts.
Sorry, in your fantasy drafts.
Dynasty brain there.
Yeah, dynasty brain. But all these guys are most likely locked in first-round picks that you're probably going to be drafting going into the season here. All right, next tier.
Yeah, I labeled this top 5 battle.
Okay.
Because even though I've already given you my top 5, I think these are the names that could battle into that top 5. Into that tier, right?
Okay.
Kyren Williams, Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor. 3 names that, carry a lot of different conversations and spark some controversy. Who do you want to talk about first? Here?
I mean, I say the first name is Jonathan Taylor because that's the guy that I thought you would also have in the RB1 contention. I think a lot of people do believe in JT. I know there's a couple of concerns or question marks on potential utilization. Take us through it and why he is in this tier for you.
So really that is part of the main concern for me. I do think in a Shane Steichen offense, when it is running the way he wants it to with the healthy Anthony Richardson, the same way we saw with Jalen Hurts, the running back spot is not targeted that often.
Sure.
We've seen years where the Eagles targeted the running back position less than any other team, and they were a very good offense. Jonathan Taylor's very capable of catching, 60 receptions. But I don't imagine that playing out. In fact, I've given him 9% of the team's target share, and this is where he's landed for me. And you might say 9%, you just gave Gibbs 15% or whatever it was, right? Well, last year, Jonathan Taylor had 8%, right? And that was with Gardner Minshew. That was with the guy who is going to dump the ball off to the running back spot. So it's a combination of, I don't think that Jonathan Taylor's going to get the checkdowns that we want. Hey, a guy like Anthony Richardson's in trouble. He gets out of the pocket and rushes it himself.
Exactly.
That's not ideal for a guy that you want to catch a lot of passes. I still think he'll have plenty of opportunities through the air. And then also in the red zone. When I look at Anthony Richardson, last year I think he had 4 rushing touchdowns, right? And if I'm not mistaken, he only played 2 healthy games.
2 healthy games, exactly.
And I know that he and JT didn't play that much together, if at all. But I think Anthony Richardson is going to be a vulture in the red zone, on the goal line for rushing touchdowns.
He might be the Jalen Hurts. Sorry. I mean, the Eagles drive down 1 yard line. You think it's JT, or you think it's DeAndre Swift, or you're going to think it's Saquon Barkley. No, it's Jalen Hurts doing the tush push. It's going to most likely going to be Anthony Richardson just running it in with his power.
And this obviously has a part to play in it, but at the moment, if I was to tell you if you were to ask me like, who do you bet will be top 3 in rushing touchdowns this year? Anthony Richardson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. I think those are the 3 guys who will score the most rushing touchdowns at the quarterback position. And ultimately, I just think that as much as I love Jonathan Taylor, I don't think that he has like the RB1 ceiling that we have seen in the past. And to be fair, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. That is something that you have to consider. And he has been a disappointment since his RB1 season, which was back in 2021, right? Since that time in 2022, he was RB17 on a per game basis. And last year, the RB12 on a per game basis. So the name brand can only take you so far. I think he's a great player, but I don't think he's going to be utilized in a way that gives him RB1 ceiling.
Yeah, I would completely agree in that sentiment. And don't hate us for it. This is still very fluid. Anything can happen. Zach mind might change as we get closer and closer to the season. I think that's it. If Kyron Williams, I would say really quickly, Blake Corum is a new addition to this offense. Obviously, you still have him statted out to be in the contention of a top 5 battle. Where does Blake Corum fall for you in this? I'm not even sure if he's going to be your top 40, but where does he fall for you taking those opportunities away from Kyron Williams going into this year?
We will talk about him here later on in the video, but last year, Kyron Williams had 68% of his team's rushing attempts.
Okay.
You have to imagine that comes down, especially if you spend day 2 capital on a running back in Blake Corum. I've still given him the lion's share of the work, 55%. So it comes down to a realistic, percentage there.
Sure.
And I still think he's going to be heavily utilized in the air. He's still, someone who could finish top 5, but Blake Corum is going to play a part. Last year, we didn't have any Rams running back outside of Kyron Williams, who had at least 30% of the market. That will change this year, I think, with Blake Corum. This isn't a young guy that you just kind of like wait in the wings. You get him involved, not to the point where he's stealing the job, but ultimately, I think Kyron Williams, his usage is going to come down slightly, and you're going to hear a lot of people saying he should be top 3 ranked and should be a first-round pick, and showing you that he scored over 21 points per game last year. That's great. I don't care what happened last year. If we played fantasy football every year and based it off what happened last year, we'd lose a lot of leagues, right? We got to think a little bit further and use a little more context. So I still think he's going to be a great guy. He's going to be a high usage player, but it will come down a little bit. Just before we get into the next tier, we got to let you know that if you want our rankings for best ball for redraft this year, it's very simple. All you need to do is become a Mother Flocker member with the promo code LAND. You will also get a DM to us for advice. You will also get a Dynasty team review if you have a Dynasty team that you want us to have a look at. And in about a month's time, you will also have our draft guide for the 2024 season. Boy. So consider signing up, but let's get back to the video.
All right, go through your top 10 battle. Okay.
Yeah, all these names could battle for the top 10. Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco, Derrick Henry, who's in Baltimore, Devon Achane, who could take another step this year, Joe Moneybag Mixon, who lands in Houston, Alvin Kamara, and Josh Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, who lands in Green Bay. A lot to talk about here. Who do you want to cover first? Because there's a lot of different names to dive into.
There is a lot of different names. I was surprised you had Joe and Alvin, I'll be honest with you, in this tier. I don't know. For some reason, I just thought you wouldn't have him in this tier. I love both of those guys. I don't want to get too much into them. But let's talk about, I think, the 2 controversial players I would say a lot of people are seeing in the community. And that's, for me, that's Devon and Josh Jacobs. Those are the 2 controversial plays that I have been hearing. Maybe you have something different. But let's talk about Devon. With the utilization, obviously, can he stay healthy? I think is the biggest question mark at the moment. But he is somebody who did miss a lot of time this past year, but in a points per game basis, finishes a top 5 running back. They bring in another running back in Jalen Wright. How's that going to affect him in his workload?
So I don't see Jalen Wright, and we talked about this on the Dynasty channel, I don't see Jalen Wright as a threat to Achane. I see more him as a threat to Raheem Mostert. Okay. I think he is the long-term Raheem Mostert replacement. Now, we have to keep in mind that Raheem Mostert has never stayed healthy an entire year outside of last year. Like, that was an anomaly. I'm really glad that he did it. I'm thrilled for him that he had a career year. But I think we will see some regression on the way. But ultimately, I see Devon Achane getting a little bit of a bigger portion of this backfield. And I think Raheem Mostert comes down to earth a little bit. He'll still be the RB1. But what Devon Achane gets through the air is really what's going to be the difference maker here. Last year as a rookie, he had 11% of the target share. 11% of the target share when you have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle on your team, that's pretty special. I mean, I've given him 10% of the target share, and I still think on a per-touch basis, he'll be one of the most explosive, dynamic players in the NFL. And if Raheem Mostert goes down, which we've seen a lot in his career, Jalen Wright will play a role, but it will be Devon Achane who gets the lion's share of the work. So just how explosive that offense is, how explosive he is, how valuable he is on a per-touch basis, there's really no running back who scored more fantasy points per touch than Devon Achane last year. So I get it, you're betting on him to stay healthy, but in that offense, with that explosiveness, he's just an exciting player to have on your team.
Yeah, and Devon is somebody that's going to be really hard for me and has been really hard for me as I was doing my rankings as well, trying to compare him. He's in this tier. I just don't know if I feel more confident in the floor that he's going to potentially having um versus some of these other players, because I feel like sometimes when you think about Devon, you saw him last year and it was, a 30-point game. And then it was a 1 point game. But obviously he got
I
injured,
don't
but
agree. I
there
think
was
if
more
the games
consistency.
he was healthy in, you were winning weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. But if he's not healthy, he's gonna miss chunks of what, like we saw. But that's only 1 year. Don't want to put that unhealthy tag on him as of yet. But I think a lot of people in the community, from what I've been hearing, is the biggest conversation is, can he stay healthy? Can he stay healthy?
Sure.
Because of this year, even preseason, he was injured in preseason, and people thinking he wasn't going to get those opportunities. Josh Jacobs.
There will be people, by the way, who pass on HM because they don't know if he can stay healthy. Like if you have a crystal ball and you can predict the future, an NFL team's going to hire you straight away, right? I think predicting injury is very, very difficult. But let's say this: if he does stay healthy, and the Dolphins saw what he did for them last year, is he not going to be more involved? Like,
Sure,
how do you not get that guy the ball more, right? So, anyway, sorry, Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, Josh Jacobs, this past year didn't finish in the best way because obviously he was injured in the second half of the season. He finishes as the RB28. But if you look at that weeks 1 to 12 before he was injured this past year, he was a top 5 running back. Very interesting. New team as well. Some would say a better offense, no doubt, with Jordan Love. Is he still this guy that's going to be of value? Because last year he rose into the early, second round? Not my early second, but in the second round, where he was normally going in the 4th round of your redrafts. Now it feels like he's most likely going to be in that same spot, early, mid to late second, maybe even third round.
I got him in the 4th round of our mock draft the other day.
Okay.
And he feels like a really good 4th round pick if that's where his ADP stays. The issue is that Josh Jacobs has survived on ridiculous market share of his backfield in the last couple of years, right? In 2022, when he was the league's leading rusher, he had 80% of his team's rushing attempts. Unheard of. Like, doesn't happen nowadays, right? Last year, he had 77% of his team's rushing share. Wasn't the most efficient running back. Keep in mind, this guy's not going to do much for you through the air. These are PPR rankings. He's never scored a receiving touchdown. And now you enter into Green Bay, where the philosophy of Matt LaFleur is not to ground and pound one guy into the ground, right? No disrespect to PFF, but there was a tweet that they tweeted out, and it was a quote, and it said, Josh Jacobs is capable of being a workhorse back, and it was Matt LaFleur. And it was a little bit of gotcha journalism, if I'm honest with you. No disrespect, but they did not take the whole conversation that Matt LaFleur had into place. And our guy, Coach Speak Index, replied with the entire interview. And during that entire interview, Matt LaFleur said, yeah, he's capable of that. He's capable of handling the rock 70% of the time. But that's not what we do here in Green Bay. Here in Green Bay, we keep guys healthy. We try and keep them throughout the entire season. We're going to, get Marshawn Lloyd in there. We're going to get A.J. Dillon in there. We're going to keep everyone fresh. Right. So to me, it sounds like just because Josh Jacobs has handled a ridiculous amount of share of his offense doesn't mean that's going to happen in Green Bay. He's going to be better than he ever has because he's behind a great offensive line and he's in a great offense, but he's not going to have that same market share of his rushing, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are concerned. At least I have a huge concern of Marshawn Lloyd. I do believe he's going to be playing a role. I haven't started out the Green Bay Packers as of yet. What do you have Marshawn taking away from Josh Jacobs this year?
So I have Josh Jacobs at 55% of the market. And if you think that's crazy, consider this. The RB1 in Green Bay for the past 4 years, hasn't had over 51%. Okay? So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I have Marshawn Lloyd at 30% of the market.
Okay. Interesting. Good to know. Love this list. I think everyone here, I don't think there's anyone else, if there's somebody else you want to be talking about specifically in this tier.
I'll just quickly say I think Derrick Henry is a potential league winner. He'll be one of my favorite running backs to draft. If he stays healthy, I don't see how he doesn't score 10 to 15 touchdowns.
I agree.
Rachaad White, I think, is a safe play with what he does in the air. Isaiah Pacheco, the Chiefs did nothing at running back. Nothing to replace him. Joe Mixon is exciting in that offense. Think about an upgraded version of Devin Singletary there in Houston with that offense. Alvin Kamara is ranked a little bit low for me because the offensive coordinator has changed in New Orleans. This is no longer the same offensive coordinator who was content with just dumping the ball down to Alvin Kamara 10 times a game. Alvin Kamara was awful on the ground last year. He was not explosive. He was not efficient at all. And I think second-year Kendre Miller takes a lot of the work on the ground. I still think Kamara will be the preferred back, but I think his domination of that backfield will come back a little bit with a new offensive coordinator who doesn't have blinders on for Alvin Kamara.
Sure. And that's fine. That's fine there when I think about this tier. All right, take us to your next one then.
So these are guys who are battling to be top 15 to 20 or so. James Cook, who had a great year last year. Aaron Jones, who finds his way in Minnesota now. Raheem Mostert, who we might all be sleeping on.
Raheem the Dream.
But there's got to be some regression based off what happened last year.
My goodness, that's wild.
That was a historic year. It was an outlier based off what we've seen in history, based off his age. I would be shocked if the same thing happens again. Ken Walker I have here as well. Zamir White, David Montgomery, and I also have Ramondre Stevenson in this tier. I think all these guys are battling for that top 15 to 20 range in fantasy this year. Anyone you want to talk about in particular there?
Yeah, Kenneth Walker. This is what's interesting. I thought he would be in this top 10 battle. That's why I was surprised Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara were there. I thought maybe Kenneth Walker would fill one of those spots. Obviously, this past year, RB19, 13.3 fantasy points per game. A new offensive coordinator comes in who is, I would argue, a more pass-happy guy. And Ryan Grubb coming out of Washington, who we all know, if you haven't followed Dynasty, that is your top wide receivers in Rome Odunze, who was a first-round draft pick, Jalen Polk, who's a wide receiver for the New England Patriots, and then Jalen McMillan, who is now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Zach Charbonnet is also part of this offense, but I know that there is a little bit of question marks at the moment with the community. It was like, okay, where can we actually see him? And you have been top 15 to 20, so take us through that.
Ken Walker's a tough name because he is super talented, but I mean, he's a guy that's hovered around 950 to 1,000 yards in both of his first 2 years on the ground. You know, he's been a good player. He's not been a league winner. He's had weeks where he's won you weeks, but he hasn't necessarily won people championships. And if people think I'm being too harsh, I would like them to consider that I'm giving him a career high in rushing attempts.
Okay.
In my projections. His career high so far is 228 attempts. That was his rookie season.
He missed 2 games, by the way. He's missed 2 games in the last 2 seasons. Yeah, okay. Keep that in mind.
I'm giving him 241 attempts. That's 56% of the market. Okay. And I don't think it's unfair. And last thing I'll say on that is this team is going to throw the ball a little bit more. Okay? Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, is going to have a great year. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. I think Ryan Grubb is really going to focus on the passing game. I think this team will throw the ball more than they have since 2018, 2016. I think they'll throw the ball a lot. So that's a little bit of a projection for me with the change at OC.
Okay.
But still, if you look at since 2020, I've still given the Seahawks about at the top of where they've been in rushing attempts. I just think their offense will be better as a whole. And I've still given him a high percentage of the offense. But I just think he's that guy who gets you right around 1,000 yards, 7 to 10 touchdowns. He's going to give you maybe a receiving touchdown on the ground, but he's not a league winner. He's a week winner, but not a league winner for me. So
yeah, and I would completely agree. I have the likes of David Montgomery ahead of Kenneth Walker, which may sound crazy. I also have the likes of Ramondre Stevenson, who was just a year removed from finishing as a top 10 running back in 2022.
Sure.
Obviously, David Montgomery finished as a top 20 running back this past year, and he's splitting the backfield. Right. Yeah. So I find this tier very interesting, especially with Kenneth Walker, because I know a lot of people still believe in him or have concerns about him. I think you're one or the other. You either loving Kenneth Walker or have question marks here. Let's talk about Zamir White. This is a guy that is coming into a perfect opportunity. Josh Jacobs is no longer here. They don't draft another running back. They have Alexander Madison. They do draft Dylan Law, but more in the 5th, 6th round of the NFL draft, which we're not necessarily concerned about. What are your projections here for Zamir White going into this year?
I think Zamir's going to dominate this backfield.
Zeus, they used to call him.
I don't think it's going to be particularly close. I mean, you look last year when Josh Jacobs was out, Zamir White getting around 20 carries per game. Antonio Pierce loves to run the ball. He loves to run the ball.
The Raider way, baby.
And Zamir White is going to be that workhorse for him if he can stay healthy. And to be fair, Zamir White was very effective with Josh Jacobs gone last year. Former 5-star recruit. We know he tore both his ACLs in college at Georgia. Yeah. But he's finally healthy. He looks like an explosive version of himself. Maybe he finally reaches his potential. I think he goes crazy on the ground. Who is he competing with? He's competing with Alexander Mattison, the most inefficient running back in the past 3 years in the NFL.
Lost his job essentially to not lost his job, but
Cam Akers, who was again one of the most inefficient running backs in the NFL last year
as well.
So I just think when you look at this backfield, it's going to be him. There's history of him and this head coach, and him getting a bunch of volume, and that volume alone puts him in this battle. I think he'll be, depending on where his ADP is, someone I'll draft a lot.
Okay. James Cook, I love. Aaron Jones, of course. You said Raheem Mostert, one of the most undervalued guys, finished RB5. Let's talk about him really quickly. If there's anything you would like to say about Raheem Mostert here.
No, the only thing I'll say is I expect it to come down to earth just a little bit. Okay. I don't expect him to score a historic amount of touchdowns, the most ever for the Dolphins.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't he break like Barry Sanders' record or something for rushing touchdowns? I don't remember, but
he had 18 rushing touchdowns this past year, which is crazy.
I expect that to come down a little bit. I've still given him over 10 touchdowns on the ground if he can stay healthy, but I just expect that to come down to earth slightly.
I wonder if he's going to be playing the Monty role. Well, I guess that's kind of what he was playing already. The Dave Montgomery role, and Devon is playing the Jahmyr Gibbs role, I guess you can
exactly, but I expect Achane to take a further step in this offense as they trust him more and more.
Okay.
So ultimately, I just think it'll come down to earth a little bit. And there'll be people who started playing fantasy last year who watch this video and like, these guys are idiots. Raheem Mostert's the RB1, right? So I don't know. It would be a historic outlier if he repeated.
All right. High risk, high reward tier.
Yes.
Take us through it.
Running backs that are a little shaky, but the upside is pretty enticing. Jonathan Brooks, rookie running back for the Carolina Panthers. How healthy will he be off that ACL tear?
Sure.
James Conner, who has one of my favorite running backs in the class now to compete with in Trey Benson. Will this be a situation in which Trey Benson takes over towards the end of the year? Is this a guy that you want to draft and then trade later? Trey Benson's very talented. Don't discount Trey Benson. DeAndre Swift, a guy who, just respectfully, has been always in this talent conversation, so talented, but never really consistently won leagues. Now he goes to Chicago with a rookie quarterback. What does that look like? Javonte Williams. Is Javonte Williams a starter?
Oh, boy. Gosh.
Right now in my projections, I have him as a starter, but I have no idea who starts for that team. So to be continued, right? Jaylen Warren. Austin Eckler, Najee Harris, Devin Singletary, and then Brian Robinson. A whole bunch of guys who, if you draft them and they're your RB1, you're like, what have I done?
Yeah, what's happening here?
If you draft them and they're on your bench, you're like, hey, this is fun. Like this could be something really exciting. So just a list of a bunch of dudes that could be really exciting, but could also be terrible draft picks.
A bunch of dudes just being dudes.
I'm a dude dressed like a dude, like another dude.
Look, I would just say quickly on guys that I do believe have the highest ceiling in this tier, from my perspective, would be Jonathan Brooks, Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson, and Devin Singletary. Those are my top 4 running backs that I like in this tier. Just based off of their usage, the projected usage that should be going into, Javonte Williams, hopefully he can stay healthy after that ACL tear. Jonathan Brooks, the same thing. It instantly comes and is the number 1 running back. Devin Singletary going with the New York Giants as well. Who else is there to compete? They drafted Tyrone Tracy and Brian Robinson. I mean, phenomenal year this past year. I would say, I think very underrated. Even though he finished as RB21, he did get injured and missed, if I'm not mistaken, the second half of that season, which really, hindered him, or not the second half, but he missed 2 to 3 games, if I'm not mistaken, which really took him a step back. But I love this offense. and Brian Robinson's offense specifically. But all these guys have really good upside and have the highest upside in my eyes in this tier.
Yeah, B-Rob's tough because I think he was really surprising through the air last year. I think we can agree.
Yes.
Like we didn't expect him to do that. With Eckler there, that's really my main concern. I'll just touch on Devin Singletary really quickly. I think he will dominate your backfield, but I think your offense is going to be very bad. So what is that worth? That's the question you have to ask yourself.
I think he'll be more pass heavy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be beneficial of what he can do through the air, but you're going to be on one of what I project to be one of the bottom 10 offenses in the NFL. But we'll get into this next tier just to finish off. This tier is called You Got a Running Back. It's you have one.
You got something.
Hopefully they're not your starter, but maybe they could be something for you. How about Ezekiel Elliott? The fantasy community wants to keep burying this guy because at this point of his career, he should be buried. He's just like, no, I'm just going to keep coming back in like slightly relevant roles. Is that cool?
Is that all right?
Zach Moss, Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, Tajay Spears, and Tony Pollard. Kendre Miller, who I think has an important role this year. Gus Edwards could be the most valuable player in this entire tier. And then Trey Benson and Blake Corum, a couple rookies who I think could make some noise this year. But Gus Edwards, man, I mean, he could be the most valuable guy in this tier. He could be someone who scores 8 to 10 touchdowns, and it's a little bit of a surprise. Like, oh, damn, yeah, Gus Edwards was the guy in Los Angeles. So you got a running back here.
You got a couple people here. Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard, no idea who's going to be leading that backfield. I think we can both agree this is most likely going to be a 50-50 split. We can't even tell you who's going to be the pass-catching guy because Tony Pollard was a pass-catching guy. Tajay Spears was a pass-catching guy. Maybe you can with your projections, but I don't know if you want to go into it. But
it's funny you said that because I feel the same way. I gave both of them 40% of the rushing attempts, and I gave both of them 8% of the target share. I have no idea.
It's like 50-50, really.
And ultimately, I think they're going to cancel each other out. I think it makes sense for this team, but I think there'll be weeks where one of them is really good, but I don't know that I'll be consistently able to start them. If I had to choose one, I'd choose Tajay.
If you had to choose one, choose Tajay. Okay, and that's fair. I guess because he was drafted on this team and I guess new head coach. That makes sense.
I just think he's a more explosive player at this point of their careers.
Zach Moss and Chase Brown downtown. I think Chase Brown is going to be the second half winner here, in my opinion, in that offense if Zach Moss can stay healthy. But there's no one. I would say a guy that's not on this list, which is completely fair, why he's not on this list that I've kind of been struggling with a little bit is Nick Chubb. Yeah. Nick Chubb, I think, is deserving to be in this top 40. I can't tell you where. Because of that injury, right? Like, what's that timeline? How's he going to look? What's the expectations? Is he just going to be the old Nick Chubb? We've seen Nick Chubb come back from gruesome injuries before, but that was when he was younger. He's older now. They have Jerome Ford, who kind of establishes a role in this backfield, which you can see here. You got a running back. I think he's deserving to be here. Once again, I just don't know where and how that's going to look like.
Yeah. Nick Chubb is tough because, number one, the injury that he sustained was not like the Breece Hall injury where it was a clean cut in the ACL. It was a gruesome injury. It was like J.K. Dobbins level bad ACL tear. And even though it was early in the season, we don't know when he's going to be 100%. A lot of people are going to point towards Breece Hall and like, you should have Nick Chubb higher because Breece Hall was good off an ACL. Mm-hmm. I could point to 12 running backs who weren't good off an ACL. Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's more often than not that you are not the same version of yourself as a running back the year after your ACL rather than the next year. And I don't know if he starts the year as the RB1. If he is in camp and he's healthy, he will be pushed way up this list. But at the moment, I just don't know when he's healthy, when he's himself.
Yeah, according to Fantasy Pros, the ADP consensus via PPR scoring, Nick Chubb currently right now is RB 39.
Okay.
So he's
I have
just inside.
I have him as RB 47 right now, but here's the thing. I've only given him 35% of the rushing attempts. If I found out that he was going to start week 1, that would drastically change for me.
Yeah.
And he would be comfortably a top 30 name, if not top 25. And But I also saw a video of him running on a track, and he did not look right. It reminded me of when we saw J.K. Dobbins running. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like some high school gym. He's running up top on, and it was a video on YouTube. He doesn't look like he's running like himself. He looks abnormal. So I need to find out way more about him before I start betting on him.
Yeah, no question. No question when it comes down to Chubby there.
But that is it, guys. We appreciate you big time. Hit the like button, subscribe. We got a lot of videos coming out on this channel. We appreciate you. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you very soon. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.